Joel Embiid and James Harden, the process and the beard. Trading Ben Simmons in a blockbuster trade to land James Harden dominated the headlines during trade deadline. Daryl Morey and James Harden were back together, but after all the drama, the blame placed on Ben Simmons, the fan pressure to get a deal done, pairing James Harden with Joel Embiid is one of the most terrifying duos in the league. They made this move to win a championship now, while sticking it to Ben Simmons for not fulfilling his contract with the team. But as I'm watching the new Sixers play, I can smell the fraudulence coming through my screen. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and help the channel grow, and let's dive into another episode of James Harden being a 3-level scorer, elite playmaker, and passer that thrives in the pick and roll is a very nice change compared to playing on the same court as Ben Simmons, at least for Joel Embiid. Watching the Sixers in their recent games, especially their last two against the Nets and the Nuggets, I've noticed certain things. And there's 3 reasons why I think this new look Sixers team is not a real threat for the playoffs, even though they give off the appearance of having that top level talent. The first reason is that Matisse Thybulle is still a non-factor on offense. By non-factor, I mean he's playing 25 minutes a game and averages only 5.7 points per game and 1.1 assists a game. He's a non-shooter since he shoots 29% from 3. Yuck. I agree that he's an elite defender, but to not even be a threat to score the ball? At least Ben Simmons could pass and playmake for the team on offense. It was very obvious during the Nets beatdown of Philly that their defensive strategy was just to ignore Thybulle and send resources towards stopping Embiid and Harden. As you can see in this clip, that Durant straight up leaves Thybulle to be open in the corner so he can stop Tobias Harris from getting to the rim in the Harden pick and roll. In this next clip, you can see Seth Curry is guarding Thybulle. He leaves his assignment so he can help and double Embiid because he really has no faith that Thybulle will even take a shot. On this clip, you can see again, Curry leaves Thybulle so he can roam around like a free safety. And look at the spacing that Harden and Embiid pick and roll has to operate in. Here, just watch Seth Curry. Totally ignoring Thybulle, lets him roam around on defense and pretty much stop ball handlers from getting into the paint. Now that's Seth Curry and the Brooklyn Nets. If I'm projecting to the playoffs, the way the seeding is set up right now, the Sixers may end up playing the Raptors. Now imagine Pascal Siakam running that free safety role. This Matisse Thybulle problem will get exposed in the playoffs, as he could easily be schemed off the court, but he's definitively the Sixers' best defender, one-on-one and on team defense. So that will be a coaching decision that might end up defining this entire season. And just thinking out loud, but can a player really be considered an all-defensive team level player? When his offense is so bad, the coach may have to think about whether or not he should actually play them in the closing minutes of games, but that's a question for another time though. But yeah, Matisse Thybulle still presents the same exact problems that Ben Simmons did for this team. And don't think it's going unnoticed that Thybulle has essentially not improved since being drafted, which is also something he shares in common with Ben Simmons. Moving on to reason number 2, the role players. The Sixers are definitely a top-heavy team, with Embiid playing like an MVP and Harden still averaging a double-double. The rest of the team is filled with a bunch of unreliable role players. Tobias Harris is obviously overpaid, but what's worse is that he has a history of not showing up in high-leverage games. He's a good shooter, but I just feel like he's never really found his role on this team. Was he the second option when Ben was on the team in the past? Or the third option? Was he the second option this season, and now he's the third? It just feels like he never got to embrace one role for a long enough period of time. Tyrese Maxey is still a very young player in his second season. It's hard to expect him to be the starting 2-guard in the playoffs when he only played 13 minutes a game during last year's playoff run. He's definitely taken a step up since the Harden trade, but it will be his first playoffs where the opposing team is game planning for him. Trading away Seth Curry left the Sixers' remaining roster to include Thybulle, Danny Green, Georges Niang, Shake Milton, and DeAndre Jordan. None of them average over 9 points per game. A real solid defensive strategy to force the others to beat them might be the ideal strategy that can sink the Sixers. These guys are just gonna suddenly figure out how to score more against good defensive teams? I wouldn't bet my money on that. Speaking of defense, the final reason why I think the Sixers are frauds is actually their defense. When the Brooklyn Nets whooped the Sixers at home, Kevin Durant said in his post-game comments that they wanted to make the Sixers run. The Sixers are not a good transition defense team. It's tough to become that when you have a 270-pound big man and an out-of-shape 32-year-old who has a history of not being interested on defense. In the 2 losses to the Nets and the Nuggets, the Sixers were outscored on fast break points by 20 and 18 points. Since the Harden trade, their defensive rating has has gone from 108.9 to 112.7, an increase of 3.8, tanking their ranking from the 10th best defense to the 17th best. Outside of Joel Embiid, the only reliable defender on this team is Matisse Thybulle, and depending on how you feel about what I said earlier, he may or may not be the guy that you even play. In the playoffs, teams like the Raptors and Nets, who thrive off transition scoring, can use that advantage to literally run the Sixers off the court. So overall, the defense has gotten worse, their transition defense being awful. They suddenly have a shortage of reliable role players, and Matisse Thybulle still presents the Ben Simmons playoff issues for the Sixers. I think any team with this many obvious flaws is not a real contender for the title. James Harden and Joel Embiid might be one of the best duos in the league, but with all the hype around the team this season, they might be doing what they've done for the past few years in May, and they might be watching the NBA Finals from their couch. Thanks so much for watching. How good do you think the Sixers are this year now that Harden's on the team? And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and help the channel grow, and I'll catch you next time.